Nidhi. Hello everyone, welcome back to yet another weekly Sunday meeting. So this is a weekly meeting that we have with all us like-minded individuals, all the doctors. We all get together and try to discuss what's happened over the week, discuss a COVID update, and also discuss some inflammatory processes that are going on that had created havoc in the COVID era. So today we are going to be talking about APOE, vitamin D, and about sleep. So we have with us Dr. Nidhi, who's the Associate Medical Director of ENT and the head of the Safety Committee in Shroff's Charity Eye Hospital in Daryaganj, and more fondly known as the torchbearer of this group. So I would request her to kindly take over the session and discuss with us all the topics that she has very diligently prepared. Over to you, Dr. Nidhi.
Thank you, Dr. Meenakshi. I think the last few weeks have given us some breather, and I was thinking back to it was March 2020 that we started locking down and really thinking about how we were headed into this. And so it's like nearly 2 years of pandemic thinking. It's become a part of our psyche, and a lot of us are finding it difficult to even get out of that thinking. And perhaps rightly so, but a lot has happened in these 2 years. सर ने हमारे को अगर एक चीज सिखाई है तो वो ये है कि so long as we keep the scientific inquiry alive, we can deal with things. And a lot of things have emerged in the last 2 weeks, which we will go into a little bit. I think I'll start sharing my screen and see how we proceed with this. So we are going to briefly touch upon what is the situation in the world, especially focusing on some areas which have till now had an almost zero COVID policy, and has that really worked for them. So New Zealand and Hong Kong have been places with zero COVID policy. Australia has been almost draconian in its control of, they didn't even allow their own citizens to enter when all this started hitting the roof. So if you look at it, United Kingdom, which is going through its own problems right now, we see that there is a slight uptick in infections, despite the fact that we seem to think that the pandemic is over. The numbers are close to 870 per million. But look at Australia, Germany, Hong Kong, and New Zealand. Numbers are very, very, very high. Even though they have started showing a downtrend in Hong Kong and in New Zealand, Germany, it is kind of just hovering up and down like a sawtooth. Australia, it's only going up. So apparently, the zero COVID policy has not really worked. If we look at India, United States, and United Kingdom, the big three. Now, why I took them separately here is because it shows you the comparison of the scale between these countries. And if we take the other countries, the scale gets lost. We are 4 times the population of US. We are 10 times the population, at least, of UK. And look at our graph and look at their graphs. We are seeing a lot of write-ups in newspapers, in even scientific journals, which say that our numbers are not correct, which is something that one of the delegates brought out in yesterday's talk also, the IMA, the NDB, the National Medical Board meeting. So I don't think people understand that there are lessons here. Those lessons are probably incidental. It's not that we are setting out to prove anything. It just has happened so in our country. And things in our favor have been the demography, have been the transparency of our communications, and have been the willingness and the openness to try logically whatever might work. Look at, for comparison, look at UK, US, Israel, and India. UK has had almost 70% population even quadruple vaccinated. Israel has almost 90% population quadruple vaccinated. US has about 70% population fully vaccinated and boosted. In India, we haven't had that kind of numbers because the numbers are very high in population, but look at our infection rates and look at their infection rates. So even though being vaccinated is very, very important, being vaccinated is better than not being vaccinated. However, vaccination alone has also not helped. If we look at the graphs here, you see Indian graph right at the top right corner. Look at Singapore, which had a zero COVID policy. Going up 2,900, about 3,000 per million, compared to India's 3.1 per million. Israel just going up and down, but presently at about 700 per million, with a population which is less than a 10th or a 12th our population. Australia, gone up, come down, kind of hovering there, 1,200. UK going up again at 800. Look at Nigeria and Ethiopia for comparison. The numbers are in decimals, 0.17 per million and 0.3 per million. These are the countries which don't have good vaccine coverage. These are also the countries which have very poor health facilities. So you might say that they are not testing enough or reporting enough, but the numbers, the difference in numbers is very, very huge to just simply ignore. Look at United Kingdom, look at Israel, look at US. These are the countries which are well vaccinated with good vaccine coverage. But if we look at the graph here, again, this is red in the areas which are more vaccinated. So there are other factors which are working. And what are those other factors? Incidentally, if we superimpose the apolipoprotein E world distribution graph on this, it will be almost like a duplicate of this. If we look at confirmed deaths, cumulative confirmed deaths, US nearly 3,000 per million, UK 2,400 per million, and these are the countries which are demographically at present challenged. So we will go into further detail on what is happening here, but these are populations which are largely aging, which have higher comorbidities, and which had a genetic predisposition through the APOE cluster, which might be not working in their favor. If you look at the vaccine doses, look at Israel. 194 per 100, which means that about 95% of their population is double vaccinated and then some. And look at Nigeria, 13 per 100. Look at South Africa. After Omicron, they have inched up to 53, but they were less than 25 before this Omicron wave. In India, we have about 128 or 129 per 100 vaccine distribution, which means that about 80% of our population is double vaccinated, or 70% if we are counting some triple vaccinations. UK 205. So definitely their numbers are double vaccination for everybody and then some. Australia 212 double vaccinated and some. But look at Nigeria and Ethiopia right at the bottom of the chart. Less than 20%. Russia becomes important because of the present conflict, because with Russia and Ukraine, there is going to be huge population movements, and depending on what is happening in those countries, the pandemic may not get over as quickly as we were hoping it would. Germany, about 80% coverage, UK about 80% coverage, US about 80% coverage, Singapore 90% coverage, and yet we are finding Singapore numbers suddenly going up. So with initial protocol, India is leading the chart with more than 800 million vaccinations, but that is also only about 60% of our population. If we look at what is the distribution, Omicron has completely taken over. Right now, with UK numbers going up, we are a little worried whether BA2 will continue to infect and evade immunity provided by BA1 also or not. Needs a little bit more study, and we need to find whether it is cross-reactive or immune evasive. But as of now, with 100%, so if you look at Hong Kong, if you look at Singapore, look at Australia, these countries with zero COVID policy have got high numbers because Omicron just doesn't care. In a way, that is good, because Omicron is also providing a degree of immunity to the population. We have to figure out whether that immunity is working for future variants or not. If we look at the US chart, as of 11th of March, their new cases are still hovering around 45,000. Their 7-day average being 35,000. So they're still higher than their 7-day average. Their deaths are around 2,000, 1,500. Their 7-day average is about 1,200. And UK, this is distinctly a little disturbing, because if you see the graph is going up, and UK decided when they opened up that they're going to, even their Zoe app, that they're going to stop really tracing. That after Omicron, what else can they do? Partly this might be artifactual because they opened up and because everything is open, but this is something that we need to work on. We need to study this a little more deeply, that it might be the BA2 variant, which is also immune evasive. Their deaths are around 115, the 7-day average being 150. The deaths are now dropping off, which is a good sign. If we look at Israel, new cases 3,500. And deaths, if you see, are definitely down. So vaccine does seem to protect against severe disease and death. Look at Hong Kong. Look at this flat line. If you see, this is the highest they went. 109. So they've not crossed 3 figures, and that to the lower end of 3 figures. And look at this. This came to about 20,000. It was so just locking it off did not work. Vaccinating did not work because the virus has its own. It's an airborne virus which is going to travel no matter what. And yes, exposure of the population and incidental exposure to the virus from travelers might make it worse, but it doesn't need a traveler to bring it in. Look at India. We've had distinct waves. The Alpha or the Wuhan, the Delta and the Omicron. But with each wave, even though we have hit high numbers, we have come down. And with the Omicron wave, we have had a very fortunate experience of having very low deaths. The Delta was truly the worst phase of Indian public health. I remember those days when we used to wear face masks, face shields, PPE kits, and I remember the days when, on our college WhatsApp groups, people used to say that going to the hospital, I'm writing my will and going, I don't know what is going to happen. So from that to what we are today, that, we are largely, we have accepted that we will be exposed. Largely, we have accepted that there is a pathogenetic pathway that we can work with, and that logically we can mitigate the effects of the virus and of the inflammation and create a background of mitigated effects, if not zero effects. So if we look at our 4 cardinal states, Delhi, new cases 177, 7-day average 260. Maharashtra, new cases 320, 7-day average 390. Uttar Pradesh, 117, 7-day average 140. Now, seeing what has happened in the elections and what kind of crowds that we have seen in the post-result celebration, I would still like to wait for another week and see what happens. But agar abhi bhi kuch nahi hua, to we may truly have come out of it. I didn't see any masks in those celebrations. I saw a lot of people crowding and falling on top of each other in those celebrations. So we will wait for a week because Omicron has a shorter incubation period and see where the numbers take us. Kerala, 1,000, 1,200. The 7-day average, 1,500. Comprehensively, all cardinal states are coming down. If you look at the world data, the world has from the beginning just been undulating under that 10 lakh number. And we then went up in the Omicron wave, crossing 30 lakhs. And here we see that there is an uptick again. This uptick seems to be driven by Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, Singapore, the places which have till now had a very tight control on the number of COVID cases, which have very high vaccination rates. Add UK to the mix because they are showing a significant uptick also. But look at the deaths. The deaths have not gone up to the same extent as the previous waves and are now also only showing a downtrend. So we have to also see whether, so the virus itself is not causing the deaths and the disability. The virus is not, when the virus is novel and not recognized by the human body, it triggers a hyperimmune response, which causes hyperinflammation, and thrombogenicity and microclots and targeted ischemia, which is sustaining the inflammation, which is what causes the long-term damage of the virus or the short-term disability and death. As we, as a human population, have gotten exposed to the virus, whether through vaccination or through infection, our body is beginning to recognize it. So that hyperimmune response is also beginning to get muted. And the hope is that as this virus becomes endemic, we will be looking at probably pockets of epidemicity, but largely low state continued presence, or even we may not even register that we have the virus anywhere now. In the coming few months, at least we have to wait till the coming autumn and winter. But so probably we will come to that point. But just to give you a perspective, the the 1990s, HIV was rising. And I think I was in 8th or 9th, 85, or maybe 10th, when first we read reports of HIV. And it was, I remember, a full India Today issue which was devoted to it. And it gradually rose to beat tuberculosis deaths in 2005. And then it began to come down as our management of the virus improved. If you look at tuberculosis, it has largely stayed constant, and even to this day, tuberculosis causes enough death and disability for it to be a major public health problem. The estimated range of COVID deaths is nearly double of what HIV and tuberculosis have given. But within these 2 years, so much work has gone into it that even 40 years down from where HIV began, we don't have a vaccine for HIV. And there are reasons for that. But 2 years into the pandemic, we have vaccines, we have more research going into pharma therapy of COVID, and we have repurposed drugs which can be put to use logically. So there are about 1.5 million estimated deaths from tuberculosis in 2020. About 1.8 to 3 million estimated deaths from COVID-19. The number is almost the same if we're talking global figures. But there are 2 million deaths from fungal diseases, and we don't have any answers to that one as yet. The scale of the tragedy is when you look at how many children have lost one or both parents to COVID-19 in the first year of the pandemic. And that's 1 million in 1 year. But if you look at how many children have lost one or both parents to HIV in the 30 years of the global pandemic, that's close to 20 million. All these problems require us to take stock of our life, of our vision, as doctors, what is it that we can do to mitigate this, to actually bring about public health behaviors which take us further into a world which is safer and which has more love, less politics, more logic, less polarization. People don't dig their heels into their own stance, and where public health takes precedence over money and profit. And I say this with complete responsibility. In the last 2 weeks, so much data has been released by Pfizer, and some of it, even the entire document has been completely redacted. Some of it shows alarming number of adverse events following vaccinations, which was not released earlier. Some of it says that the doctors have to look for some conditions, which has not been informed to the doctors or nurse practitioners involved in vaccination campaigns. It's as if in a hurry to get authorizations, we have willfully ignored the full implications of this campaign. And I say this again, being vaccinated is extremely important. Being vaccinated does protect you from severe disease, but it does not prevent transmitting the disease to other people if you get it. It does not prevent getting the disease in the first place. So it's not the end game. If you look at various vaccines which have been involved in our public health campaigns from 1980 to 2020, you see tuberculosis right there at the top. And you see vaccines to rotavirus, yellow fever, pneumococcal, measles, rubella, polio, diphtheria. So you see all these vaccines have made a huge difference to the global health. And we are not, as a population, anti-vaxxers. Human beings are probably illogical, but they do understand survival. So, being transparent about your communication, you allow people to make logical decisions about their health. You can release data that you need to in a measured fashion on a need to know basis also, but that data should be available to people who will be affected by those measures. Despite high vaccine coverage. US and UK stand out with higher disease prevalence of two autoimmune diseases, SLE and rheumatoid arthritis. Is that one of the reasons why US and UK are also standing out with higher rates of infection and higher mortality? Perhaps. The apolipoprotein E has a spectrum of expressions, but the important thing is that it is involved in lipid metabolism, and in a concentration dependent manner, it activates the NLRP3 inflammasome and IL-1 beta response in the bronchoalveolar fluid, which means that now apolipoprotein E is responsible for lipid metabolism and other things, among which very important is mopping up oxygen radicals and mitigating oxidative stress. If you look at the rise of non-communicable diseases, you see that, and maybe the hygiene hypothesis says that maybe our immune system needs to do something. So if we eliminate all infections, it will start working on something else. But Alzheimer's, diabetes, multiple sclerosis, all reaching very high levels, higher than we are comfortable with. Alongside apolipoprotein E, it appears that vitamin D is not just associated with bone health and mitigating allergies, but involved in more than 58 autoimmune studies, even as of now. Risk of disease doubles with poor vitamin D receptor function in at least 44 autoimmune diseases, including and not limited to poor sleep, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis. It appears that the body is in a nuanced dance where a lot of chemicals are working together so that we have a good quality of life and that our bodies stay healthy for survival. But the human body historically is not meant to survive much longer than 50 years or 55 years. And now our average ages are climbing up to 75 years, 78 years, and in some countries even approaching 100. The biology hasn't caught up with the increased lifespan. So the thymus involutes by about 20 because historically the human body did not need to produce fresh T cells beyond that age, and exposures were all done. Now our travel exposes us to more and more pathogens which are new to us, and we need to continue to mount those responses, but we don't have that kind of T cell reserve. Our longevity has reached levels where our vitamin D, where our apolipoprotein E, where our mitochondria are not keeping up with it. And which is not to say that we cannot do something to improve those numbers, that we totally can. And those are the anti-inflammatory lifestyle measures that we need to put into everyday practice. If we look at what happens to the body in autoimmunity. It's the normal response which goes out of whack. I mean, if we look at diabetes, there is destruction of B cells by the toxic mediators and oxidative damage. We look at rheumatoid arthritis, there is increased TNF alpha, IL-1, IL-6. We look at, oxidative stress is causing TNF alpha and IL-1 beta to rise from innate immune cells, the macrophages and the neutrophils. And we don't have enough oxidative pocha, mopping, to clear these away, which causes destruction of the normal tissue. And this is affecting every system in the body, starting from the skin, the gut, the blood, thyroid, bones, lungs, central nervous system. Everything can be affected by these autoantibodies. Recent studies have brought out the autoantibodies to ACE receptors into focus. That may be the reason why some people are landing up with prolonged symptoms in both COVID and post-vaccination, and why central nervous system effects are increasing. So what is apolipoprotein E? It may be a genetic marker for severity and long haul. We are still early in the course of studying it, but there is a distinct population distribution of APOE phenotypes. The apolipoprotein E gene is located on chromosome 19. The three common alleles are epsilon 2, which is about 5 to 10%, epsilon 3, which is about 65 to 70%, and epsilon 4, which is 15 to 20% in general population. Interestingly, North Indians have epsilon 4 dominant populations. It is a key modulator of lipid metabolism, and we know that severe SARS-CoV-2 is associated with decreased circulating HDL but increased intracellular cholesterol. If you remember, sir ये कहा करते थे कि अगर HDL fall कर रहा है तो intracellular cholesterol rise कर रहा होगा, where the oxidative stress might be starting, and that was the reason why he started giving the statins. APOE4 is associated with a heightened immune response. The higher production of IL-6 and TNF alpha by activated macrophages results in triggering autoimmunity. ये भी सर कहा करते थे कि autoimmunity बढ़ जाएगी in the coming years. He in fact went so far as to say that we will see increased cancers also coming up. APOE4 increases prothrombotic properties of endothelial cells and increases neuroinflammation through CCL3. There is increased pyroptosis and release of virus fragments and activation of NLRP inflammasome pathway by the DAMPs. So all of these things can be mediated via apolipoprotein E, and epsilon 4 phenotype seems to be more affected. So the APOE functions on the blood-brain barrier. It functions on the T cells by decreasing their proliferation. It works on the chemistry by increasing nitric acid production, by decreasing IL-12, and by decreasing MHC expression. So apolipoprotein E is actually the balancer between immunity and autoimmunity. In the hepatocytes, it increases VLDL and increases lipoprotein clearance. In adipocytes, it maintains the triglyceride hemostasis. In the smooth muscle cell, it decreases proliferation. In the platelets, it increases NO production. And the lipid metabolism is maintained by the apolipoprotein E. So it's not just limited to a tissue. It is limited, it has far-reaching effects on the body. As I was telling you, the epsilon 4 phenotype causes a loss of physiologic function. So lipid metabolism is decreased, inflammatory response is increased, synaptic injury and function is decreased, but there is a gain of toxic function. So there is increased leakage in the blood-brain barrier, there is decreased vascular function, there is increased insulin resistance, there is decreased glucose metabolism, decreased mitochondrial function, and all these put together result in formation of decreased antibody clearance and increased aggregation. So there are amyloid plaques which form. These have been implicated in Alzheimer's, but also we seem to be seeing a lot of brain fog right now. And this might be at the center of what's happening. With the increased blood-brain barrier leakage, the brain may actually be exposed to viral fragments also directly, rather than just the antibodies. So APOE has a lot of effects, even up to the clotting and viscosity mechanisms in the body. And we seem to have hit a sweet spot with statins because they regulate the APOE and lipid metabolism. We know that the APOE4 phenotype is more vulnerable to cardiovascular disease, stroke, hypercholesterolemia, as well as Alzheimer's. The increased vulnerability to viral pathologies might be because it activates the NLRP pathway. The homozygotes APOE4, that means you get epsilon 3 from the mother and epsilon 4 from the father, you are a heterozygote. The homozygotes have about double the risk of infection and about 5 times the risk of severe disease than APO3 heterozygotes. So if you have epsilon 3 and epsilon 3, or epsilon 3 and epsilon 4, you seem to have some degree of protection. And North Indian population has predominantly APOE4 phenotype. With the use of statins in COVID-19, we observed about a 35% decrease in mortality. That might be related to the APOE regulation. But pharmacology apart, we were working on, how sleep deprivation has made this pandemic even worse. So we have seen what sleep deprivation does. Let us examine what good sleep does. Good sleep boosts immunity, reduces inflammation in the body, and also allows the body to be geared towards dealing with inflammatory triggers. It improves metabolism through growth hormone, insulin sensitivity, as well as ghrelin and leptin balance. It decreases blood pressure, improves resting heart rate with an improved cardiovascular health. It improves mood, productivity, and performance. It improves cognition and memory. It reduces stress and cortisol, and it also improves weight control. So people who sleep about 7 hours a night have, on the average, with all other factors balanced out, 2 kg less weight to carry than those who don't. Interestingly, there is a neurologist who has been working on sleep and who says that vitamin D might have a role to play in sleep regulation. And her take is that when you start supplementing with vitamin D, you have to give vitamin D in the day rather than at night, because it also suppresses melatonin. So look at how beautiful the dance is, that you require vitamin D in the sleep areas of the brain, but you also need to give it at a time when it will not suppress melatonin. The sleep-wake cycle actually is the balance between catabolism and anabolism, and the increased glycolysis, glucose uptake, and fatty acid oxidation that we see in wake-up states is brought down during sleep. The body is recovering from inflammation that we have given it through the day, and the metabolism is being reset. How vitamin D affects sleep is that it binds to the receptors of the brainstem in anterior and posterior hypothalamus and substantia nigra, the midbrain gray matter and raphe nuclei, in the nucleus reticularis, both pontis oralis and caudalis, to improve sleep regulation. If you look at the structure of vitamin D, and if you look at the structure of melatonin, you find that they are kind of mirror images of each other. The vitamin D regulates tryptophan conversion into 5-hydroxytryptophan through its actions on the hydroxylases. This is what is metabolized to serotonin to produce sleep hormone melatonin. So vitamin D needs to be available in the key areas and work on endogenous serotonin to be able to produce melatonin at the right time. Is that the reason why when you expose yourself to sunlight within half an hour of waking up, you have better sleep the coming night? Is vitamin D the switch between the two? So if you, and why is it relevant now? So it's relevant because just adding vitamin D to ICU admissions and deaths of COVID-19 patients have reduced. If you look at standard treatment only, then 50% of those on standard treatment required an admission to ICU. Whereas when you supplement with vitamin D, and here they're talking about 60,000 units for a week, then only 2% were admitted to the ICU or died. 8% died in the arm which did not receive vitamin D supplementation. And this is a very easy thing to do. I mean, we have so much sunlight that it is sad that we Indians have such low vitamin D levels. And I have been following vitamin D for last several years because of how many people come with abysmally low, unrecordable vitamin D and have allergies. This is something that we had seen last week, how sleep can cause neurodegeneration, sleep deprivation can cause neurodegeneration, cardiovascular disease, infection, and cancer. The other thing that needs to, so again, the dance. Melatonin is increased by vitamin D. Vitamin D is needed for sleep regulation. Melatonin is also significantly associated with survival of intubated COVID-19 patients. But is it melatonin, or is it what sleep does? So the slow wave sleep improves growth hormone and prolactin and decreases cortisol. The IL-2 that is triggered by the prolactin and growth hormone causes the predominance of Th1 response, which is protective. If melatonin causes good quality sleep, and this IL-12 Th1 response keeps our body in good immune health, we are not only fighting infections that we are exposed to now, but we also have good uptake of the antigen and good recall when we encounter this antigen tomorrow. If we do not have good sleep-wake cycles, then our naive Th cell response is disturbed. Our lymph nodes do not work optimally. In the daytime, the lymph nodes are pushing the immune cells into the body, and at night, the body is pushing the immune cells back into the lymph nodes and bone marrow. The cortisol trigger at waking up is to improve our ability to fight whatever we encounter by improving our cytotoxic natural killer cells and not allow it to fight our own body with an altered Th1, Th2 balance. Even the Dalai Lama says, and he is the ultimate in meditation, that sleep is the best meditation. But this apart, a few years ago, I had read Daniel Amen's book on knowing your brain. He has done more than 75,000 PET scans and come to the conclusion that depression is not just depression. That with simple questionnaires, and he's given those questionnaires in his book, with simple questionnaires, you can figure out whether that depression needs dopamine, serotonin, GABA, or what is the chemistry can be made out, and hence provided some diet and medical guidelines that if this is the way you behave, then this is what will help you. His conclusion is that less than 7 hours of sleep at night causes overall lower brain function. And this is PET proven. I think if there is one takeaway from it, for those who want to control their weight well, please sleep. For those who want to control their mood, please sleep. And confession, this week, I did not get my sleep. This week, I did not sleep before 1 o'clock on any night. Last week, I was feeling very happy that I had done 6 days out of 7. I had gotten into bed by 11. But this week really threw me off. And I think that will happen when we try to get back to our lifestyle corrections. We will naturally hit our lows and failures and embrace them and carry on. So next week I will aim to sleep again before 11 every night. I don't see anything in the chat today.
Yes, surprisingly. So जैसे sir कहते थे कि या तो सब कुछ समझ आ गया या कुछ सब कुछ ऊपर चला गया. That's what sir used to say. So, Dr. Nidhi, you mentioned about the Indian population, suffering from vitamin D. And I've recently read a paper that says that 90% of the Indian population is vitamin D deficient. And so there seems to be a connection with melanin. Melanin apparently does not let you absorb the vitamin D, and even obesity. The fat cells, they seem to be trapping vitamin D and not allowing that absorption. So that's probably also in spite of that sunlight, the melanin that is there to protect us from the UV rays, that is interfering with the vitamin D absorption as well. So
mount a helper T cell response. Another interesting one, if you see here.
Just a second.
This is actually.
That's all right.
Yeah. So you require a degree of exposure and to the right kind of sunlight. It's not just, and that's where the Indian population suffers, that our lifestyles have become such that we don't expose ourselves. That is one. And also we largely staying indoors, largely staying within air-conditioned environments, not working out, not having activity. So vitamin D will not be incorporated unless there is a felt need for it by the body. And if you are not moving the optimal amount, then vitamin D supplementation also will not work. Which is why I think the school sports periods are very important.
Yeah, absolutely. So, another thing that, I've just been doing these series on vitamins. So I've been reading about vitamin D, and all the literature, they always say that, you should be consuming vitamin, and I use the word consuming, you should be sort of basking in the sun between 11 to 3. That's what they say. But I honestly believe that this is just influenced by Western literature, where they have their, the optimal sunlight is received at that time. Dr. KK used to always say that 8 baje wali jo sunlight hai, that is the ideal one for us, because so of course everywhere that you read about vitamin D, they also stress upon the latitude. And even I think that the sun between 11 to 3 would be too harsh for us to be. So what's your take on that? Because the literature categorically says 11 to 3. But I honestly believe that's just influence, and it's just, I've not seen Indian papers just differing either. So what's your take on that?
And it's not just, as I said, it's not just how much you're exposed to, but also how much you demand of the body. अगर आप बैठे रहोगे तो बॉडी की डिमांड ही नहीं है to assimilate the vitamin D that you are exposed to also. So it will not assimilate. And this neurophysician that I'm talking about, who's done this work on sleep, she says that when we supplement vitamin D, we notice that the sleep improves. But as the sleep improves and vitamin D assimilation improves, we notice that also these patients start complaining of burning hands and feet. So vitamin B reduces. So you have to supplement both vitamin D and B for such people. And this need is more in women than in men.
Right. No, so my question was regarding the timing, so that this question comes up कि किस समय हमें खड़ा होना चाहिए in the sun,
जब
or
खड़े
we
हो
should be.
सको, मुझे लगता है जब खड़े हो सको. So
I've
I
been
tell
also
patients
thinking.
कि if you can do that for half an hour a day, at least you are giving yourself something. The best time would be, say, sunrise to an hour and a half later, because the sun is too harsh for us to, and it will further increase melanin. Further,
Yes.
we will have longer
Yeah.
requirements of exposure.
That's what I have been. So that's what I'm saying, that even the Indian literature does not differ from this 11 to 3. जो सूर्य नमस्कार जो बताया गया है, सूर्य नमस्कार किसी ने नहीं बोला 11 बजे करने के लिए.
हाँ,
वो
कभी
उठते
नहीं.
ही करने. हाँ, it's never said. So in our with the latitude that we are in, I don't think that 11 to 3 is the way to go, and I think it should be a little earlier.
I think it should be 8 to
9.
11.
Yeah, yes. Same. That's what that's what we've been talking about in the other shows. And it should be a little earlier, 11 to 3. Jo har jagah like all the papers are talking about that time. And I don't think that's apt. So there is a question now in the chat box by Dr. Sanjeev. He's asking, what is the role of vitamin C for absorption of vitamin D?
I don't know.
It enhances the absorption
Yeah, I don't know.
No, vitamin C. Let me just confirm this. I don't want to make loose statements, but yes, it does.
I feel like everything is connected to everything else. And if we go down to the molecular basis, we will find that all the things that our ancestors have done have some scientific logic.
No,
Or
but
hamari, so if you santre, all vitamin C rich fruits are coming in winters, and the sun becomes a little more tolerable in winters. So if you get out and if you have the fruit of the season, you will have more vitamin D and you will have better immunity. If you look at mango, then mango is a cooling and it has which is the supplement that people who work out take for muscle recovery. There is a supplement that people take for muscle recovery when they work out. Mango is rich in that supplement. And so, if you do that, and it puts you to sleep. So if you do that in summers, then you are cooling your body and you are allowing for time for recovery. So everything, there is a, if you go local and if you look at your own science, you will find there is a logic to everything that we do.
डॉक्टर निधि, आप कह रहे हैं कि विटामिन डी के लिए एक्सपोजर, सन एक्सपोजर, तो it is very difficult practically. You have to expose your body also, So taking a supplement is easier.
नहीं, अगर आप arms को expose कर रहे हैं, face को expose कर रहे हैं, legs को expose कर रहे हैं, that's okay. And that's why people in the West do sunbathing.
Yes.
But if you have the whole body covered and it's only the face which is exposed,
yes.
Then it's not going to work.
Yes, definitely.
It's also not going to work even if you expose your body, you're not moving your body. Movement is what is the trigger for assimilation.
Okay.
It is unless the body needs it, it will not assimilate it.
Females are also afraid of tanning, So taking a supplement every month, I think it's sufficient. 60,000 units taking it.
Sir, I think it is driven by advertising, consumerism. Gori ladki honi chahiye. Things are changing. Bipasha Basu is considered beautiful. Deepika Padukone is considered very pretty. So things are changing. But we have to understand that probably our olive skin tone is okay. We don't have to be very fair.
नहीं नहीं वो फेयर वाली बात नहीं है. जैसे आपका फेस टैन हो गया, बाकी बॉडी ठीक है, then that looks odd, you know. तो ये है एक प्रॉब्लम.
लेकिन आप सनस्क्रीन लगाओगे तो भी विटामिन डी नहीं बनेगा.
तो भी नहीं बनेगा. तो मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि टेकिंग ए सप्लीमेंट ऑफ 60,000 यूनिट्स, एक कैप्सूल एवरी मंथ, ऑन द फर्स्ट ऑफ एवरी मंथ यू कैन टेक एंड विल.
अगर आप हिलते डुलते रहोगे तभी काम करेगा ना सर, नहीं तो लेते ही रहोगे.
हाँ, हिलना डुलना तो जरूरी. एक्सरसाइज इज डेफिनेट, इट मस्ट. हाँ, यस.
So, ma'am, is it okay to take it once a month, like sir said, that once a month, if we take it on the first of every month and do our exercise, and I mean, going into the sun, is that sufficient, ma'am?
No, I give it once a week. I'll be honest. And I give it for, depending on where the baseline levels are, I give it once a week, and I give it for a month or 2 months or 3 months. And then I ask them to repeat their test on the mid-week level. That means if they are taking it on a Sunday, they should get tested on a Wednesday or a Thursday. Because by Saturday, again, their vitamin D level will have dropped. And by Monday and Tuesday, it will still be high from the oral dose. So I would want to know what is their Thursday, Friday level, Wednesday, Thursday level, their midweek level. And if I find that the vitamin D levels are rising and up, we then would reduce it to once a fortnight and then finally to once a month. But I have seen such low levels that I start them off with every day for 3 days and then once a week for a month or for 2 months. In the people who come to me with long COVID symptoms, I will even add an ivermectin with the same schedule. So vitamin D and ivermectin together.
Dr. K.K. Agarwal used to say that give it loading dose for 8 weeks and then once a month.
So, sir, we need to.
In the case of deficiency, if there is a severe deficiency, then the loading dose is required once a week and then for 8 weeks and then once a month for 8 months. And then you can check your levels. If they're adequate, then you can give yourself a break for some time.
Mostly लोग तो मैम deficient होते ही हैं.
हाँ जी, absolutely होते हैं, but that's what I mean. I think it's always better to get the test done. Yeah, the test done and then only take it, because we don't want to just loosely say कि आप सब ले लीजिए. It's a live show. So get tested and then on doctor's advice only, I think it's better to take it. Yeah.
So maybe one question. Difference between APOE, B and E.
Sir?
Difference between APOE, APOB, APOE.
सर जो एपोलाइपोप्रोटीन ई है उसके phenotypes significantly diseases के साथ associated हैं. जो C है वो कुछ प्रोटेक्टिव है. मैंने अभी इसको डिटेल में इतना पढ़ा नहीं है तो मैं आपको अभी कमिट नहीं कर रही, but I can go into the detail of that and talk about it in the next week.
Because in routine labs, APOE is often done. They give the report. And what is their norms?
So I'll go into further detail on this.
And their norms also vary. Minimum कितना होना चाहिए? APOE, B and E. Minimum कितना होना चाहिए? Report में. As per blood report आती है ना, उसमें सब mention है that minimum how much.
Sir, I can't hear very well today, unfortunately.
There is a break, often breach the sound.
Sorry, so what was that? APOE का range पूछ रहे हैं आप?
A का,
That's some.
B का, E का minimum. What is minimum level?
So minimum नहीं, max. अगर वो एक level से ऊपर होता है तब we have a problem. So APOE is somewhere around 1.2 grams per liter, and that is a marker for heart disease. Is that what the question was? I'm not so sure. I think Dr. Nidhi was.
APOE.
Is there a problem? I'm not able to hear.
APOE they mentioned it should not be, I think, more than 90 something. In reports they mentioned.
More than 90 तो नहीं है शायद. I think it's इसमें there is a difference in the male and the female. It's above 100 if I'm not mistaken. Let me just check. So the range is for men it is 110 to 180, and for women it's 110 to 205 for APOE, and yeah, that's the range that we have. So I don't see more. So Dr. Sanjeev is saying that he will always ask patients to eat amla with exposure to sun daily for better utilization. Yes, so vitamin C. So there are few papers that have talked about the. So vitamin C does not require any activation. Vitamin C को vitamin D की जरूरत नहीं होती, but vitamin D might be aided by vitamin C to certain extent. And so if you are doing that, then that's a good thing. So there is no cross reaction or anything, because there are certain vitamins, if you take them together, then it decreases the absorption of the other. But with vitamin C and vitamin D, that is not seen. Dr. Nidhi, can you hear us?
Hanji?
Can you hear us? So there is a question here that
not
is
very
asking,
well, unfortunately. No.
So there is a question about sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
How
does that?
What are the side effects of sleep deprivation?
So
you have
sleep
shown
deprivation
one slide
apart from
of sleep deprivation. Can you repeat it, please?
Sleep deprivation drives
you have
the
shown,
TH.
one slide also.
He wants to see the slide.
All right. Okay.
So wants to see the slide.
Can you see this?
Yes.
So sleep deprivation decreases the TH1 response and increases the TH2 response. TH1 response is what is protective for us, and TH2 response is what drives autoimmunity and even allergies and cancers and all of that. It decreases the NK cell activity and CD8 T cell function. So these two together actually increase the vulnerability to cancers. Because it is affecting innate immunity, it also increases the vulnerability to infections. It decreases antibody production. It decreases antigen presentation. So the pro-inflammatory state is more prolonged. This seems to all happen because there is increased inflammatory cytokines IL-1, IL-6, and TNF-alpha. The mediators of inflammation also are increased. So CRP is high if you are sleeping less, and comes down by just improving the quality and the quantity of sleep. This in itself appears to be having some relationship to the melatonin levels in the body. The IL-1, IL-6 and TNF-alpha also mediate a rise in blood pressure, increased heart rate because epinephrine is increased, and hence poor cardiovascular health. Also, these affect the glymphatic system, that is the local lymph system of the brain tissue, and decrease the clearance of toxins from the brain and increase neurodegeneration. If you see this one, in the slow wave sleep, the growth hormone and prolactin turn the body towards a Th1 dominant response, which is for improved both B cell and T cell function. This not only allows good uptake of antigen, but also good recall of uptaken antigen, so that when you encounter the same antigen again, your body's response is good. If you look at the hormonal milieu in sleep, the cortisol rises around the time to wake up. This green band is the sleeping time. And the naive T cells are being generated in sleep. They are pushed into circulation when you wake up. When we are sleeping, the bone marrow is working to improve the production of NK cells which come into circulation. From the marginal pool, they are pushed into circulation in the waking time, and from circulation, they are pushed into the marginal pool in the sleeping time. The cortisol actually signals for redistribution into bone marrow, and the epinephrine mobilizes it from the marginal pool. These were the ones that you wanted to see?
Yes, thank you. And one suggestion, on Fridays, you always put the topic and link in the group, because gradually the attendance is getting down, which is not good, because we don't get such a good material anywhere else, and we wish to have more and more attendance also.
Okay sir, I'll do that. उससे मेरी शायद Saturday night भी better हो जाएगी, because I'll make it through the week.
नहीं, Fridays को दे दीजिए.
That's what I'm saying.
Along with the link, that is a must.
ठीक है.
People have forgotten ID and other numbers. That's why it's tough to convey others too.
ठीक है sir.
Thank you.
Done. So on that futuristic note, let's end the show today. We thank Dr. Nidhi and all of you present here for keeping Dr. KK's dreams alive and joining us here every Sunday morning and discussing all these brilliant topics. We had a great session today and a lot of insight into vitamin D and yet again on sleep. So we'll be doing more of this next week. We'll